Welcome back to the Foreign Desk Podcast. I'm Lisa Daftari. What a week. As the quote goes, there are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen. Vladimir Lenin, of course, the former premier of the Soviet Union, said that. And of course, it could not be more true of this week. I struggled a lot with what was happening in the aftermath of the incident at the Capitol. Of course, I said it then, and I'll repeat it here and many more times. It was irresponsible, violent, a total loss for those who had gone there to peacefully protest. But that's the point, that there certainly were peaceful protesters there. In actuality, they were in the extreme majority. And you'd think that with both sides calling out the violent protesters, that for a moment, left, right, center would be united on the point. But the left and mainstream media made it such that condemnation alone wasn't enough. They weren't willing to say that there were peaceful protesters there. They weren't willing to say that this was a segment of the population that's hurting, that wants answers. They didn't even ask why all these people got up and even flew across the country to attend the rally. They weren't willing to accept a condemnation that didn't include a total crucifixion of Donald Trump, his followers, his cabinet, members of the GOP, any right-leaning media, all of it. With one broad brushstroke, they let those hundreds who charged the Capitol represent and flat out replace and symbolize the entire conservative party and its future. Because they were evil, so are all of you. They made it impossible to condemn the happenings of the day without pushing for impeachment, without categorically denying support for Donald Trump. So Twitter became a bloodbath between left and right. Even though both sides were condemning the violence, the social media bullies made it impossible for anyone to ask any questions about the state of our nation. They made you sound like a racist if you dared to compare the protests of BLM over the summer and the raid on the Capitol. And memories obviously have been erased because nobody remembers storming the Senate during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings or when AOC held that protest inside Nancy Pelosi's office 3 years ago. 51 people were arrested, if you remember. And heaven forbid these instances should be brought up in comparison. But denying these points wasn't enough. They thought, why not just silence them all? And here we are almost a week after. Big tech doesn't have any qualms about its selective cancel culture. If evil and inciting violence is the determining factor, then why do evil tyrants in Iran who repeatedly call for death to America, or members of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, all on the terrorists, have platforms? Why is freedom of speech a factor when defending the rights of foreign dictators but on these sites, but not to our own president and those who support him? The bottom line is that as large as big tech thinks it is, silencing half this country is like putting a bandage on a leak the size of Niagara Falls and hoping you can stop the water from coming through. As divided as we are now, the media, big tech, leftist politicians, the denying of this perspective of 75 million people in this country is creating a blind spot that they will painfully have to deal with in the next 4 years and more. To talk about the state of our nation, I want to call upon Elijah Schaffer, national reporter for The Blaze, host of Blaze TV's Slightly Offensive. Elijah was there reporting live from the Capitol. We're going to talk to him about what he saw and what the aftermath has been for him personally on all of this. Welcome to the show, Elijah.
Lisa, thank you for having me on. I wish we could actually be speaking in a better situation, better time, but so we are here.
Yeah, so let's catch everyone up. For our viewers who may not be familiar, you are a pretty courageous roving reporter. You are often traveling the nation to cover unrest, particularly in the last year. And Wednesday, you were at the Capitol. So let's start with that. Can you describe for people who weren't there, you were right there in the front row, what did you see at the protest last week?
Yeah, well, contrary to the popular opinion, my team and I had left Donald Trump's speech significantly ahead of the time when he called people to move to the Capitol. So there were already hundreds of people gathered at the Capitol building before Trump even got on to speak near the White House. But of course, my team went up there to try to intercept the Trump supporters because we thought that there would be perhaps like an Antifa brigade that was fighting against them, as we saw in the last two protests, the Million MAGA March and the last Stop the Steal in December. Well, we arrived approximately 20 minutes or 23 minutes before Donald Trump ended his speech at the White House. Things were pretty just peaceful and normal. There were some groups that were, you could tell were there. Proud Boys were there, some recognizable faces, some interesting characters on megaphones yelling to 1776, the barricades. And this is where I picked up the term revolutionaries, because people started chanting for revolution. they started referencing and invoking the name of revolutionaries like George Washington, saying that he was, what would he do in this point? And they all began to chant 1776. So to clarify, people saying that I was supporting people by calling them revolutionaries, in the same way when I was in Philadelphia about 6 weeks earlier, when the communists were calling for revolution and calling to storm the doors of Independence Hall while Trump was there, I used the same terminology because I think with the gender identity argument, where they say in society we should label people to which they request to be labeled, I was just trying to follow the rhetoric as a reporter and give people the labels that they gave themselves. Washington Post did the same thing, actually, calling them patriots. But of course, being right-wing, I get the front end of the persecution. Well, that being said, just to summarize it, things were peaceful. The violence started 20 minutes. New York Times confirmed my timestamp before the Trump speech ended. There was a group of agitators. Some might call them extremists. I'm not sure what anyone wants to label them. But to summarize this, they breached barriers. The police did not know what was going on. Within 35 seconds, they had already injured a female Capitol Police officer who was knocked to the ground. I have sources inside of MPD, Capitol Police, and Park Police who say that right at the start of the breach, calls went out to offer assistance for backup. It was denied. There were 50 officers within 2 minutes reach of the entrance where I was. The police put it down. The police said there was no need or no understanding of violence. But I'll just end with this, that a leaked FBI report today came out and said that the Capitol Police and the FBI had full understanding that there was an attempt to break into the Capitol building and to arrest members of Congress, or to do worse. So not only did law enforcement know about this, it appears that they were intentionally not following protocols, which led to the capability for unarmed citizens to breach the second most secure building in DC.
I definitely want to get to all of that, how this even happened. But let's go step by step. What, in terms of numbers, and I know journalists hate numbers and sizing out the crowd, how many people actually breached those barriers, came into how many people were being violent, and how many people would you say were there in total being peaceful protesters?
I would say several hundred were probably direct agitators, but several thousand were for sure following them. I mean, I climbed one of the rafters for the inauguration that's supposed to happen, to get an aerial view. It was really scary, climbing up like pipes and stuff and just trying to get on the top. But you got to get the aerial shots, which I'm now being persecuted for. There was a day and age where people appreciated journalism and they just don't anymore. It breaks my heart actually to think this, but I think for my aerial shot, you could probably look at least 2,500 people at the front lines working together to breach the front barriers or pushing forward. But I would say there was well over 100,000 people in attendance of this event. So we're talking at about 2.5% of the people maybe who were there at the front. Right. Yeah, and perhaps maybe less than 1%, well, realistically less than 1% of the people who were there that were actually causing the violence and the destruction.
Sure. And of course, and we've said it again, we'll say it again, just so this is not misconstrued. We obviously condemned even one person being violent at this protest. So this is not something that we're getting at, but we want to have a clear understanding of what happened. Some of the other, you mentioned you're getting slack for it, and I want to get into some of that. Some of the footage that you posted on social media was of inside Nancy Pelosi's office. And, it's interesting, the reaction that you got from that. Let's watch cut 4.
Check this out. We are inside her, Nancy Pelosi's office, and those are police bombing us right there.
Yeah, and you tweeted, I want to read this. Important, this is a video I captured inside one of the offices of Nancy Pelosi after dozens of alleged Trump supporters occupied it. It seems that staff left in such a hurry that they forgot to lock the doors because there were no signs of forced entry. Some vandalized it. Now, it seems to me that you're being, a very, very, an ethical journalist in terms of just stating what's going on. What's more interesting to me is watching these people in the video. They look like tourists. They look like they're actually there for a real tour. What was the feeling inside?
Definitely, there were no feelings of threat. And I want to clarify this, people that don't understand the way the chamber works, the equivalent of going into a church and saying I was in a church office is different than saying, I sat behind the pastor's desk. The offices are big in these organizations, and there's many of them. So no, I did not directly go into Nancy Pelosi's chamber, nor did I sit behind her desk or do anything to that regard. I just walked into where all these people were invading her chamber with other members of the press, I might say. You know, and the reason why we even ended up over in that direction was because they had gassed the halls with so much tear gas, and I have asthma, did not prepare for a riot or bring my gas mask, so I got pushed in there. And when I walked into the, to get some fresh air, I felt like I was going to pass out. I thought I was actually going to die, perhaps. I was starting to black out from just so much pepper spray in my eyes and gas. I was just walking through thick clouds of gas. And anyone that knows with tear gas, when you're in thick clouds of gas for more than a few minutes, it feels like your lungs are going to collapse. And so when I walked in there, I think that the majority of people in that room were probably trying to escape the gas. That's my presumption, because they weren't people thought that they had the right to be inside, it looked like, from my understanding. And being that I have a congressional press credential, police let me cross police lines. I had no police caused problems. Police even arrested someone right next to me. When I was in that office, actually, police went to clear the office and came in and were pulling people out and pushing people, and they didn't do anything to me. I just showed them my credential, and they were like, all right, man. And so, you know, I was under the understanding myself that, you know, police were taking a different approach. However, I will juxtapose this, that when I walked in, I yelled to everybody breaking in, you guys, if you breach this federal building, they can use live rounds on you, because I don't want to see Americans killed. I don't want to see officers killed. Obviously, we saw Trump supporters killed. We saw a police officer killed. It was very violent. I didn't want to see anyone getting shot. Someone did end up getting shot inside, as we now know. And I warned people, you know, please don't do this, you know, like, and even when I was in the office, I was telling people who were vandalizing a copier, I go, bro, that's your copier. You paid for this. This is taxpayer funded, and you're going to have to replace it. So, like, please, guys, don't vandalize anything in this office. And I think people just thought they were like, I think they thought it was a game.
Right. Was there any moment inside Nancy Pelosi's office, or any moment during this entire episode, where you thought to yourself, oh, shoot, you know, maybe I shouldn't be here, or maybe I crossed the boundary, maybe I crossed the line?
I think the entire event crossed the line. Now, here's the thing. I've been recording riots for the last 10 months, very severe riots. This was not one of the most severe that I've attended in terms of the property damage. In terms of death count, absolutely was definitely severe. And, you know, I have had no problems, you know, crossing police lines and doing what I need to do to document riots and to show America what's going on. I think that a lot of Americans wouldn't know what's happening if myself and fellow colleagues hadn't taken risks. I knew there was a risk, but I also know I wasn't trespassing, because I showed police my badge and they let me come in. So, you know, when Capitol Police are allowing you to cross a line based on your credential, it puts you under the circumstances that you are not being illegally entering a building. And on top of that, you know, I think it's important. I think it's a First Amendment right. If there's breaking news happening, and there was something, you know, I understand if I did a crime, for instance, if I vandalized something, if I had stolen something, which I would never do, but, you know, then I guess that for sure would be, you know, taking part in the actions. But, you know, trying to document events, finding yourself in a chamber where there was no gas, and trying to take a breather and realizing how serious the situation was, that all computers had been left unlocked, which is a major breach of national security, and trying to inform the public that we are under national attack. People who are waging what they believe to be a revolution are storming the Capitol. Yeah, I think that was very important. I don't regret telling America the truth. And I think the FBI is probably mad that the America knows this, but Americans have the right to know that the computers of national security could have been tampered with, though I just want to leave with you with this. I did not touch any computer in that office, nor did I access anything at any point, because I understand the ethical, you know, responsibilities as a journalist not to interfere with government property.
Right. And you've said many times that you haven't crossed that line. And ironically, the footage that you did gather from inside the Capitol has gone viral. Obviously, you know, a lot of I think you mentioned mainstream media outlets have used your footage, and as you said, we're always applauded for being the journalists to get the story, to be on the front line, to get the real essence of what's going on. Except for in this case, and here's a little excerpt from you telling your story on The Blaze. Let's watch cut 3.
People don't even ask me how I ended up near Nancy's chamber. I followed some people to get away from all the gas. I was trying to stay away from the officers who had live munitions pointed at us. I mean, this was a very serious case. I was respectful. I never touched any federal property. I did not access the computer. It was a staffer's computer. When I uploaded that image, I did not even know that the image was visible on the writing. It thought it was kind of blown out. This is a very extreme moment. People died, people were seriously injured, and I thought America deserved to know the seriousness of what was going on. And if that is what will penalize a journalist and a reporter today, taking the risk and the gall to actually tell the truth, then we have a very sad precedent ahead of us.
Yeah, so I wanted to show that because we get some additional footage from inside the Capitol that you took. Likewise, since that interview took place, you have obtained legal representation. The feds are looking into this. Before that, CNN was investigating the story. I'm sure you're not shaking in your boots from that investigation. But you have, social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram said that they are indefinitely canceling your accounts, but then I think they were reinstated. What the heck is going on now?
Yeah, well, to show you just the political hit job and the way that this event is being used opportunistically to take down political opposition, there's I've made a lot of enemies by categorizing and capturing the Black Lives Matter riots, and I believe, with hundreds of millions of views last year, public sentiments within 6 months of working around the clock with a few different colleagues, we changed public sentiments against BLM. Not because of their political affiliation, but because of their actions of, riotous actions of killing people, burning down buildings, attacking innocent standbys. It's just not a good organization in general in terms of the overall arching effect they had on our nation in 2020. A lot of publications have, smeared me with being a racist or being an extremist because I've done the job they were supposed to do. I wish they would have done their jobs better, actually, because if we could have compared all of our footage, then maybe there could have been a balance in the narrative, things that I might not have noticed. Maybe my own confirmation bias that came into play after I watched Black Lives Matter people kill people, even jumped me. I've been seriously injured, had a leg broken, a concussion, my face smashed open. I've been jumped, had two guns pointed at my head, been jumped under gunpoint. It's been not a good time covering Black Lives Matter and Antifa for myself personally. And that being said, you see the political hit job. A left-wing blogging website called Mashable, which is known for spreading fake news and hit pieces, wrote me at approximately 6:53 p.m. the night of the Capitol building and said, "Oh, we would like confirmation in your comment about your entire YouTube channel getting demonetized." And I just went, "That's weird. Never heard anything from YouTube." Then I get a message from YouTube the next day at around 12:50 p.m. saying that we've removed all capabilities for you to earn money on your show via our channel. And I said, "That's weird. How did you as a journalist know about this before it happened?" Possibly because you caused it to happen. And then they released an article saying, then they said, YouTuber gloats as he tweets boasting for, breaking into the Capitol, which is just, and then they, by the way, to back up their claims that I was gloating, which I was not, that I broke in, which I did not. The police let me in. And also the fact is they go, and he was sitting behind Nancy Pelosi's desk, a lie. They uploaded an image of a woman, actually. If you zoom in, you see it's a woman in a MAGA hat holding a flag behind Nancy Pelosi's desk. So, I'm not a woman. I don't know if you can tell. I mean, I guess in 2021, you could be a woman in a split notice if you want to, but I didn't switch into a woman, and they made a smear campaign. They worked with BuzzFeed, with the Daily Beast. These are other blogging sites that pretend to be journalist websites. They don't go and do any original stories. They just complain about how other people aren't doing journalism well. And they've worked, and they got me deplatformed from Facebook and Instagram. Our legal team was able to get that back online. They've also worked a very tireless campaign to remove all advertisers off of my show. Not so successly. A lot of advertisers are sticking by because they know I'm a credentialed journalist and they believe in the First Amendment. They've done an all-out assault. They have lied and gave false tips to the FBI, to Homeland Security. They've invented stories, tried to frame me for terrorist activities. They have worked in cahoots with Congress. I mean, they have gone to a point they're trying to get me in prison for 10 years. Many of these activists have stated online that they will not rest until I'm locked up for a decade. And that shows you what kind of political fight we're up against, that just recording from the inside creates an opportunity for your opposition to they're not happy with just ruining your financial future, your social reputation. They want to see you as a political prisoner because you were doing your job. And it does make me sick to my stomach that people are that evil, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, this is, I know a lot of people got a lot of heat on social media for even bringing up anything to do with the BLM or making any sort of comparison. And as somebody who did cover those protests for an entire year, from your vantage point, I mean, is there a comparison to be made with BLM, with how it started, who incited it, the actual protests, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. I think that all riots usually have some underlying similarities. Number one, that there's usually not an adequate police presence to prevent an uprising. There's a failure of administrative officials to prepare for the worst, which police are there for. And on top of that, there are usually a few agitators or extremists who are trained from organized groups that, instigate a lot of the insurrection and the violence, and other people who are opportunists just sort of jump and join in. That being said, is they use big crowds as a cover for the extremists to get in and to do what they want, so that the crowds overwhelm the police while the extremists kind of move their way through lines and get, in this case, break into the Capitol. What I saw at the Capitol was very similar to things I had seen when Black Lives Matter and Antifa stormed the White House back in June, and they tried to burn down St. John's Church, badly injuring many Secret Service members. I mean, the fact is,
but why can't we say that?
Because one is sanctioned by the government and the other is condemned. Nancy Pelosi said, she's not concerned with statues and people will do what they do. And, AOC famously said that, these protests were supposed to make people uncomfortable. And people say, well, she didn't say riots. I go, well, yeah, of course. That was the whole dogmatic issue, is that they were calling riots peaceful protests. Mm-hmm. And so, I did mock them a little bit. At one point, I called these mostly peaceful protests. And people say that was being sympathetic. I'm like, no, I'm just using your rhetoric to show you, so you look in the mirror and say, you set the precedent for this. You said to fund the police. You're the ones who said that we should have low police presence at events. Muriel Bowser is a Democrat governor. She didn't want a lot of police presence. She went against common sense because she didn't want to look like she was fighting politics with some sort of contradicting her own policies against BLM. There should have been a lot of police presence. There should have been high barricades. And they, this is what we see. The failed policies are what led to this. And also, I want to say this. When you don't punish rioters for 10 months and you let them off the hook, and you create a national sentiment that people can break into public buildings, can occupy them, can riot, and be let go with, even if they're arrested, the district attorneys will let them go. You are enabling people who might have previously never thought of doing these things to feel like they're okay to do them. And myself, meaning documenting this, it's like nothing fell out of the ordinary documenting this riot. I have spent the last year of my life, sometimes 3 weeks out of the month, sometimes 3 riots in the same week, documenting these things with little to no retribution from predominantly Democrat lawmakers in large cities. And so, no, as a journalist, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, because if it was okay and good enough for the cities, why would Congress not be okay with it for themselves? It seems like a double standard.
Right. Double standard. Exactly that. What's crazy to me is how the hypocrisy has become so normal. It's just normal to say you can't make the comparison with BLM, but yet Kamala Harris or Joe Biden actually said if these protesters at the Capitol were African Americans, they'd be shot in the face. I mean, how many BLM protesters were actually shot in the face? I mean, that's just a lie. And a whole list of leaders inciting violence during the time of the BLM movement. Let's watch this montage. Cut one, please.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
So peaceful, right?
It's the rhetoric, Lisa. It is the rhetoric that we have been hearing, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just have to say that, you know, it is appalling to me. It is appalling to me that, as somebody who has been a champion for condemning riots, I don't condemn all civil unrest in the terms of nonviolent people when there's unrest and they're feeling upset. When BLM's out there screaming and marching, I support that. When people want to have mass demonstrations, even during COVID, when all the right wing was criticizing them, I go, you know, you can criticize shutdowns, but you cannot criticize people's right to have assembly, even if it gets a little rowdy. And so, yes, I understand people get rowdy, they burn flags, they do crazy things.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, when people start assaulting police officers, breaking windows, destroying public and private property, to me, you know, not only is that absolutely not okay to take those kinds of steps, because you know, it's just not, it's not a lawful act, and it's not the way to accomplish anything. It sets you back. But also too, like, I mean, I would say, to believe, again, with saying why they were like revolutionaries, when you attack a federal building like they did at the Capitol, or like BLM did at the White House, to me, if we were any less of a civil society, those would be considered acts of war. To some people, to some strategists, they would consider that to be an act of war. Right. And you know, you have to ask yourself, though, before we blame Antifa, why did the people do it? Well, you know, is it justified? I'll leave that up to you know, the historians, and for people to look at exactly this period of history and debate. I'm, as a journalist, not here to decide public opinion. I'm just here to say, when you see why the people did it, it's because for years they have been ostracized and told that they were less valuable, subhuman, that they didn't, their votes didn't matter, that they were racist, sexist. So damn straight, I believe Trump supporters could have done this, because when you dehumanize and ostracize people until they feel like they have no power, they often use violence as a last resort, which, by the way, before anyone curtails me on that, I learned that while covering BLM rioters from all of the politicians on the Democrat Party, who were telling me, you need to understand that sometimes this stuff just happens because these people have been ostracized, and this is the natural result of discrimination. So I'm taking one out of their playbook and just slapping their same reasoning on this one.
Right. And to add to that, now you're taking away, you know, their platforms of communication to let it all out, as you said. I mean, what role will big tech play in this, you know, in this next chapter?
Well, you know, you saw today that Uganda during the elections banned Twitter and a few other social media and messaging sites. Then Twitter's safety policy came out and said that they condemn the censoring during elections, and that they believe in an open internet. And, you know, absolute BS. You have to call them on that. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is similar to what we've seen during the feudal times, medieval times, right, where one royal family would take over another royal family, and the people who served in the fields didn't have much of a say-so in it. Meaning, all we're seeing is one billionaire, who the people elected Trump, being removed from influence and, you know, trying to be erased from society by other more powerful, it would appear, or more influential billionaires who were unelected. And all I'm hearing is billionaires telling us that they will rule the country, that they know it's best for us whether we elect them or not, and that they can do it without our vote. So it's an autonomous group of oligarchs, technocrats. It's a new ruling class, an elitist class. And with New York cutting all of the contracts with the Trump company, you know, in the wake of this, I mean, I have to say, I don't really believe they think Trump incited this violence. I don't think they think I had any part in this. I don't think Senator Hawley or Ted Cruz are truly responsible. I believe this is just retribution for big tech companies and the ruling class now, as we know them, to completely crush political opposition going forward and to rewrite history.
And how will that affect like half this country, basically?
It's going to do exactly what I've been saying. Is I believe they are being honeypotted into civil unrest. For those of your listeners that are unfamiliar with that phrase, it's, you know, I made an episode on this about a month before this happened, where I warned from looking at reports from Democrat lawmakers of the way that they were looking to categorize and dehumanize Trump supporters long term, even looking at MAGA rallies. Recently, they have legislation to categorize MAGA rallies as terrorist events. I said, you know, I think that they're trying to pressure cook you guys into civil unrest. And I brought up Charlottesville, where I go, Charlottesville was an unfortunate day, and Heather Heyer, a woman, was killed. I go, but collectively speaking, when I watched the same standards not be put upon the BLM violence, which, by the way, killed 24 more people than Charlottesville and $2 billion more damage than Charlottesville. And I saw much more serious events, although Charlottesville was serious, much more serious and damaging events not be focused on and almost erased in the media. For example, with Kenosha, it was one of the greatest terrorist attacks on our soil in Wisconsin. And the argument ended up being about this guy named Kyle Rittenhouse. I go, wow, they really don't care that they burned down buildings with children inside. Children were screaming and getting thrown out of windows and stuff. Like they don't care about America. And so I told my audience, I said, I want to let you know, I know a lot of you guys are right wing. A lot of you guys are angry with life. If they could take Charlottesville and not stop talking about it for 4 years, and they could keep lying about Trump's comments that he said there were good people on both sides and he called white supremacists good people, which he never did. He said he condemned them entirely. So if they could manipulate that with only one death and minor property damage, if any of you guys strike back at the government in a way that actually creates some sort of a national attention, they're going to use that to crush all political opposition and to make Trump supporters appear to be terrorists for the rest of history.
But then, so what's the messaging? The messaging is to stay quiet, right? To be suppressed.
It's to but it's going to do the opposite effect, because I said it's the more you ostracize people, the more likely they are to lash out in violence, and that's just the truth. So the more that they silence people that are angry for being silenced, the more isolated you make them, and it's kind of like putting a stopper on steam. Eventually it's going to explode, and I really am afraid for our country and for these tech companies who are creating a society that is meant to implode. And I would say I'm starting to believe that this is by design and appears to be in line with similar plans in other countries. Not that all people are in design, not that all people are in this. It just seems this is a political opportunity to hold power. And unfortunately, I wish people were better than that, but it looks like corruption can even take out the best of countries, our own.
Yeah, it's horrific. I think it will definitely backfire. What I call the blind spot in my writings. It's denying half this nation, and it's not going to end well. I want to go back to what you started out talking about, and you tweeted about this as well. Some of the fishy circumstances under which this whole Capitol fiasco took place, and first and foremost, talking about the security there and police there not accepting additional backup. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, a widely published article from the Washingtonian came out a day before the siege on the Capitol that really detailed right-wing plans to storm the Capitol. I read that. We were hyper aware that people were possibly planning, some sort of an attack on police or something, because people thought the election had been stolen. I didn't know anything about a siege ahead of time. I didn't read the article, previously. So when I say we knew, I mean, as a country, this stuff had been published. I wasn't on board with that. I was, in somewhere in another state on a podcast during that time. But I think that when Muriel Bowser, the mayor, called in 400 National Guard, I even kind of laughed. I'm like, Trump supporters, what do they do? You know what I mean? Like, I've been to so many Trump rallies. I even stopped going to Trump rallies because I cover civil unrest primarily, and it's just Trump rallies have been too peaceful. Besides the BLM picking them off at night when they leave, and when we go into this, I remember showing up a month or so earlier, and there was bigger security for less people at the Capitol, and I was really shocked at how few security there were, and I was shocked on other things, the equipment they had. I mean, shoot, when there's just basic clashes between Proud Boys and BLM in the K Street, 14th Street, in front of Lafayette Park, in front of the White House, formerly known as Black Lives Matter Plaza. I mean, the police are still in full-on riot shields, helmets, right? I mean, this is crowd control, right. And we're in very volatile times. The riot police were not available during this time. There were no tactical police units. I started contacting people, like I mentioned earlier, in the MPD and Capitol and Park Police. And they were telling me, like, it's stand down order. They were told to stand down.
Where did that come from? Where did that stand down order come from?
I don't know. All I know is the chief of Capitol Police is resigning, and officers are resigning. I'm already getting so much crap that I guess I couldn't get any more, but I wanted to believe this was an accident and that this was just some people who were angry and acting foolishly and taking the law into their own hands. I now believe, due to the reports by the FBI, by internal sources in the police and law enforcement departments, that this was enabled. I don't think that these people were plants by the CIA. I don't have any evidence of that, but I believe that FBI had full awareness that there were extremists that were attempting to breach the Capitol. I believe that there was coordination with law enforcement to lower the amount of police and tactical response times. And I also know that there were denials for reinforcements. And specifically, there were inside the building, there were only 50 units to protect Congress while all of the sitting government was in session. To put that into perspective, I got that number from Park Police. So when there's over 400 members of Congress and the vice president meeting in a building, and there's that low of a security with that many people who are mad about an election and people are resigning over it, if it was an accident, I could believe it, but accidents don't happen like that in this day and age, especially with civil unrest. It's not only predictable, it's almost expected. And the fact that the FBI knew about this and chose not to act, the fact that the mayor knew about this and chose not to act, and the mayor was on quote saying that they wanted a specifically light presence near the Capitol security. It's just too much to ask. Was this intentionally allowed? Because I mean, if the actions against Trump and the impeachment and the swiping and the purge of followers, the categorization of MAGA as terrorist, as a terrorist gathering, Schumer pushing this no-fly list for Trump supporters. I mean, if all this happened within 72 hours and nothing like this ever happened during any previous riots or after the storming of the White House, I know that the response is politically motivated. All I want to know is what are political motivations that allowed this to happen. And I would say evidence is leaning towards yes, but I also don't want to overstep my boundaries, and I want to give more time for investigations to occur.
Wow. Wow. Just wow. All right. We'll have to leave it there, Elijah, but tell us, last question, for those who support journalism, free press, free speech, how can we help you and what's next for you?
Well, I would just say that with going through some potential legalities and issues with people in Congress, trying to suppress, by the way, writers, authors of the Journalist Protection Act, I might say, that have written and co-authored things to protect journalists, but in their quotes, covering breaking news, even in situations of questionability, are pressuring federal law enforcement to destroy my life, my family's life, the amount of death threats we've had to go into hiding. Because of the threats, both federal and from the general public, due to defamation, smear campaigns, and investigations by CNN. It has gotten unbearable. We can no longer live at our address. But that being said, the most important thing is just please support the work. If you want to check out the work for free, you can go to youtube.com/slightly-offensive or type in my name, Elijah Schaffer. I have a show that covers all of this journalism. Or you can check me out at blazetv.com as well. I don't know all my other platforms, how long they'll last, but just keep following us, keep promoting the show, Lisa's show as well. Share this with as many people as possible. I would say that take this video right now, get the link and send this to 5 people where they can find it, how they can support Lisa's show specifically so that people can still get a voice like this no matter what happens.
Amen to you. And yeah, the bullies at it again. We have to stop them and have voices like yours heard for years to come. I apologize to you and your family. I wish you guys well. I wish you guys safety and peace and harmony. And yes, please go follow Elijah, support his work, and follow the story. And we'll keep the story abreast on the Foreign Desk as well. Thank you all for tuning in. And we will post this video on all the sites where podcasts are posted. You can also catch it at youtube.com/Lisa Daftari. And to subscribe to our daily top 10, go to foreigndesknews.com/newsletter. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.